and welcome back to the second episode of Creating Your Home Medicinal Herb Garden. Hi, I'm Sue Lindsay, and this is the Well Woman podcast. I've worked with countless women and teenage girls over the years as a natural women's health clinician, and I know how hard it can be to get the help you need to overcome hormonal imbalance, infertility, and perimenopausal symptoms. I bring together my expertise in natural medicine and nutrition with insights from experts in the field of women's wellness to help you get the information you need to make a real difference to your health. This truly unique podcast combines the wisdom of the East with the clinical know-how of modern naturopathy, offering a holistic approach to empower and inspire women just like you on the path to optimized health. I'm your trusted guide as you navigate your hormone healing journey, giving you support, accountability, and guidance along the way. Thanks for listening in, and don't forget to follow or subscribe. It's time to nourish you with Well Woman. Moving on now, if you are a woman in your early 40s or mid 40s onwards, you will really want to listen into this section because these are the home herbs that you can grow for support during perimenopause, menopause, and postmenopause. So first up, licorice. I talked about licorice before for hormone balance and metabolic health, and it's really important in this life stage as well because our hunger hormones get really confused in perimenopause. This is a time where women are thought to gain a kilogram every year. So if you think about it, the average duration of perimenopause is 8 to 12 years. I mean, for some women, you might be lucky. It might be about 4 or 5 or 6 to 12 years. But for most of us, it's, gradually starting to set in about 8 years before our menopause is reached. So that's 12 kilos. That's the potential for gaining 12 kilos. So we do want to have lots of good herbal support for our insulin sensitivity and regulating our blood glucose levels and allowing our leptin to function well. We don't want leptin resistance. Also to calm down the ghrelin, which is another hormone that makes us feel hungry, which tends to get really crazily elevated in perimenopause. And there are scientific studies that have measured the levels of ghrelin in women who were perimenopausal compared to women who were premenopausal. It was a significant difference. You can listen to my other episode and some of my reels as well on the socials where I talk about ghrelin and I give some of the statistics from that study. So licorice can be very useful as a metabolic herb, and it can help to do things like reduce sugar cravings, give you more energy from the food that you're eating, which is a direct reflection of better insulin function. And it's telling you that the licorice is helping your insulin to get the nutrients from your food into your cells. It's helping you to create energy from that food. Licorice, however, we do need to use the root. So you'll want to maybe grow the licorice, make sure it's in a sunny position, by the way. It needs a bit of sun, quite a bit of sun. And when you get the flowers coming out, allow them to fruit and then take the seeds. So with many of the medicinal herbs that I'm going to be talking about in this episode, what I mean by fruit is simply that their flowers produce the seeds because they don't often give us fruit, in the way that we might think. So yes, ashwagandha will give us the red berries, but they certainly won't look like something we would want to eat. They look a little bit poisonous. And they are from the Solanaceae family. We get Atropa belladonna from this family, the deadly nightshade. So yes, rich in alkaloids. Think twice about eating them, please. I'm sure that many of you would already know that anyway, because you would look at it and think, probably shouldn't eat that. And so with the plants like lemon balm, skullcap, licorice, goat's rue, even dandelion, you look at the fruits and they're just tiny little seeds and they're a little bit dry. So that's what I mean by the fruits. So it's just when you get the ability to take the seeds off the plant and those seeds will germinate into a new plant for you. So because with licorice you're using the root, you'll have to be okay with growing it for a few years. Most of these herbs where we use the root system, we grow them for 3 to 4 years, and that directly influences the quality of the final product. So you need to give it that 3 to 4 years. And if you don't want to have to pull the plant out of the ground and you'd rather just have a plant that is a perennial that keeps growing back every year, then you might instead go for the goat's rue that I talked about before. So goat's rue or licorice. So just remember, you need herbs that are helping with your metabolic health. And you probably won't be growing cinnamon trees or turmeric. You might be growing turmeric, you might be growing ginger. Those sorts of herbs, even if you just have them in your pantry, are really nice to use for your metabolic health as well. So you can have the licorice root and the goat's rue, leaves and flowers from the garden, and then you might be adding into your teas a few little pieces of ginger or some cinnamon powder, just things to give your body a little bit more warmth and vitality when you're taking in those herbs as a tea. Basil is very important because, as I mentioned before with basil, it's a wonderful adrenal tonic. Now, so is ashwagandha. Ashwagandha works on the adrenal system to improve our stress tolerance. And over time, it gives us better physical performance, better cognitive performance, and that sort of thing. So if you're looking at growing an easy herb that's going to help with your adrenal function, just think about putting lots of culinary basil into your garden. Culinary basil, by the way, has a love affair relationship with calendula. So if you do decide you want to grow calendula, grow them together. I guarantee you're going to get really, really great growth in both of those. But they do need light. So both of those herbs need a fair amount of light, not to be burning in the sun, but they need, most of the day, some exposure to light. So chamomile is, as I mentioned before, a really wonderful herb for calming us. And calming does get very important in perimenopause and menopause because we get more significant mood swings. A little bit of depression is also associated with perimenopause and menopausal changes. And we can become more irritable. And I really think this is a time of our life where we are laying down more boundaries. And it's coming into ourselves in a way that we've never come into ourselves before. So the irritability can sometimes be a function of just putting a boundary down somewhat sharply. But anyway, we want to be able to support our nervous system, so chamomile will do that. Another reason why I do really like chamomile in perimenopause, particularly, is because during this stage where we're gaining the weight, so we're using all the metabolic herbs to help offset that weight gain, we tend to gain that weight in the middle of our bodies. Some of us will obviously put on a little bit of weight overall, but for the majority of women, what they will notice is that somewhere around your early 40s or mid 40s, you started to get this extra belly. And as you move towards your late 40s, it becomes a little bit more stuck almost. It's really hard to shift. And it's like a spare tire. And, I've looked at this myself on my own body, and I've observed this working with women over many years now. So it's called the menopot or the menopause belly. It's really hard to shift. So the medicines that you need to use or grow in your gardens to support movement in this area of your body, to start shifting that fat deposition and getting more circulation through your belly, abdomen, upper stomach, are the warming herbs. Remember, I talked about chamomile being more warm in nature, needs more light, right? So takes in more heat from the sun. It holds that heat within it, and then it delivers that heat into our bodies. And chamomile has a direction of movement in the body. It goes to the stomach, so the center of the body, and to the digestive system. That's why it's such a great digestive herb. You can use it, therefore, in perimenopause and menopause to direct movement and energy to your middle section. So what a wonderful thing to do would be to make a cup of chamomile tea in the morning and make a little bit extra. Drink the first cup as your calming mix, and then put the other cup into your water bottle that you take to the gym or that you take on your walk. Or if you're doing some exercise at home, have it ready in a cup and drink it as you're exercising, because it's going to be creating more warmth and circulation through the middle of your body rather than just, drinking water, which is sort of hydrating you. It's actually giving you more vitality in the center where you're trying to work really hard to bring that menopot under control. You may not have a menopot, by the way, which is fantastic. It's just that it's one of the things I see so frequently. And I know from my own personal experience, it's a really tough one to shift. And by the way, if you do want to work seriously on menopausal and perimenopausal weight gain, come in and see me, because this episode is just giving you some tips and tricks, but you probably want an individualized protocol, and you probably want really strong medicines. Just putting it out there in case that's something that you want to do. So those are the herbs that I would recommend for the perimenopause and the menopause. As you're getting more towards some of the vasomotor symptoms in menopause, there are lots of herbs that you can use that can support things like hot flashes, sleep problems. A lot of women will develop insomnia and disturbed sleep. I think about 60 to 70% of women who are going through perimenopause will have disturbed sleep. I'm just grabbing that figure out of the top of my head. I remember reading something recently, but I suspect that depending on where you read, the stats might be different. I would say that probably the sleep disturbance could be a bit higher than that from what I've seen in clinic. And so there are actually lots of herbs that I haven't covered here, but I probably should do a separate episode because there are so many herbs that you can use. Red clover, for example, alfalfa, just so many herbs that can assist with those vasomotor symptoms. But that is for another episode. Let's talk briefly about some of the herbs that you can plant in your medicinal garden for your immunity. Now, if you have licorice in your garden, fantastic, because licorice is a wonderful antiviral. So is lemon balm. So if you decided on lemon balm, wonderful. Lemon balm will also provide some antiviral activity. Both of those herbs were herbs of interest during COVID, by the way, when researchers were trying to find some natural remedies that could assist with COVID. So they looked into herbs like St. John's wort and in particular licorice and lemon balm. Now, licorice became so heavily investigated that all of the naturopaths were buying up all of the licorice. Nettle root was another one I remember that was being investigated. And I don't really use nettle root a lot, but I do remember that it was impossible to buy nettle root at that time as well. So I'm not entirely sure what the evidence is now on the use of these herbs for COVID, but echinacea, licorice, lemon balm, and St. John's wort definitely did fare well. There's another herb that probably should have been investigated more, and it's called mullein. This is a one that I would really recommend that you grow. You can get little versions of it, the dwarf mullein, and then you can get the tall mullein, the greater mullein. I would go for the greater mullein. It's the one that's written about in all of the herbal textbooks, and historically, it's the mullein that's been used for babies through to the elderly. So for all people, basically, to help with coughs and colds. With mullein, you can grow the plant, you can harvest the leaves, which are very woolly and soft, and you can dry those leaves and use them in herbal teas for coughs, basically. You can also make a tincture from them, just using vodka that you buy at your local liquor store. So it could be 35% alcohol vodka or maybe 40% alcohol vodka. There's a bit of a science to the preparation of these herbal tinctures, but to keep it simple, you could just go and grab your vodka and put all of your mullein leaves in a jar and cover them with vodka and then strain them a couple weeks later. So that will give you a really nice cough tincture. Obviously, you need to dilute it before you take it, maybe add some honey to it, that sort of thing. And you can also use the flowers. The flowers are very pretty. They grow on a really tall spike. When I've grown mullein, it's been taller than me. It's I would probably say it was getting close to 2 meters tall. It was quite amazing. And obviously I was just ecstatic every time I saw this plant because it really is a statuesque plant. If you've got the sunlight to support it, again, it's more of that warming nature. So you need good sunlight to grow your mullein. The birds will love it. The birds will probably spread it for you. And it just looks so majestic with this tall spike of round yellow flowers. The flowers you can harvest fresh, you can put them into oil and create an ear oil that works wonders for earaches, wonderful for kids as well. If you go online, you'll find mullein eardrops. It's basically the same thing. So the flowers have been dehydrated. They've been put into some sort of base oil. I like grapeseed oil. You can use sunflower oil, macadamia oil. There's lots of different choices for the oil you can use. You can even just use the olive oil that's sitting on your bench. And you can just leave the flowers to infuse in that. in, I would say, the oven at your lowest setting, your lowest temperature setting, leaving the door ajar, and leave it in there for about 4 hours. In the past, I've made really nice eardrop oils with echinacea as well, but it's not really a specific herb for that sort of oil extraction. So I would go for the mullein. So if you do want some herbs to support you and your immunity in the cooler seasons, just think about the lemon balm and the licorice root and the mullein. They would be really good ones to have. Obviously, there's more herbs that you can use than that, but in terms of the ones that will grow nicely for you at home, that's what I would suggest. I think also you could even go for the culinary herbs like sage and thyme. They're also really, really good for sore throats, particularly sage. Sage is the herb that herbalists will use for a razor sharp cough. And when your throat feels like you've sort of razor blades, that sensation, that's what we use sage for. So we make a really strong sage tea with that. And if you are menopausal, so you've gone into postmenopause, then sage is a wonderful herb also for you at that life stage. Helps with cognition, memory, hormone balance too. And one more herb, this one might surprise you. It really doesn't get a lot of attention, but if I told you that this herb will take no effort to grow and it will produce very pretty leaves and flowers, and it will draw all of the birds to your garden or your balcony, would it be a herb that you would want to grow? Absolutely. So this herb is called chickweed, and its botanical name is Stellaria medaia, and it's called Stellaria because of the star shape of the flowers, Stellaria referring to stars. So it produces these very cute, tiny little star-shaped white flowers. You're not necessarily using the flowers, but if you allow them to go to fruit, you'll get lots of tiny little brownish seeds, and they will produce more and more chickweed for you, and the birds will love it as well, so you can feed it to the birds. So chickweed is one of the herbs that is highest in vitamin C. I know that we think about oranges as being vitamin C. Well, chickweed is even higher in vitamin C. Obviously, in Australia, we have beautiful plants like kakadu plum that give us lots and lots of vitamin C. But, they're not always easy to grow for us, and they're not always accessible, whereas chickweed is something you can buy. You can even just buy the seeds because it grows so easily. You can scatter it all over the garden, and you'll get chickweed coming up every spring. Usually towards the end of winter, it will start to come up, and then it will flourish for you all the way through to the middle of summer. You can harvest the leaves as well, and you can cook them. So I tend to rinse the leaves and put them into things like sandwiches. I just use it as a substitute for rocket or baby spinach. And you can make infused oils with your chickweed as well, because it's one of the best herbs for rash. And I could go on all day talking about chickweed. By the way, I do have a book called The Wildcraft Guide, and it tells you all about how to recognize botanical features of plants and a select number of plants that you can grow in your garden, or wildcraft herbs, and chickweed's one of them. So in the book, I've got everything from the daily doses, recipes for things you can make from it, from salt scrubs that you can use in the shower, through to the tinctures and that sort of thing. And I cover other herbs like dandelion as well. So if you're interested, have a look at my website, get more info on that. It's called The Wildcraft Guide. You could even just Google it and you'll find it. I wanted also just to give you a couple ideas of the herbs that you could use for healthy digestion, because something that I've noticed is that we can be, really healthy generally, but we can have these really annoying digestive symptoms. For example, we might get hiccups, we might get bloating after eating and distension, we might sometimes feel a bit constipated. And so what are the herbs that will just help to keep you regular, relieve the bloating, and help you digest your food well? Well, they all will have a couple of things in common. They will be bitter and they will be warm. So the number one herb that I would suggest is dandelion leaf, because it gives you lots of bitters. It will stimulate your stomach to produce hydrochloric acid, which will assist you with breaking your food down. And I really enjoy sitting on my balcony, nibbling on a couple of dandelion leaves. They're actually really tasty. In fact, the other day I was treating myself to some dark chocolate, and I took one little piece of dark chocolate and I wrapped a dandelion leaf around it, so I had the bitter with the sweet. It was so tasty. Anyway, think about dandelion leaf as being a supportive for you if you're wanting to work on digestion. And then there's fennel. Now, fennel also can be a herb that you grow in your garden, not necessarily to eat actually, but to get the seeds, because we use fennel seed in herbal medicine. And fennel seeds as a tea cooked into your foods. You can add it to a lot of your spicy dishes so that they don't get too heating. This is really good if you're in perimenopause or menopause or postmenopause, by the way. You don't want to have really, really spicy food all the time. So you can put fennel in to calm down the effects of the heat. And the fennel, I did say, the digestive herbs are warming. Fennel is slightly warming, but it's probably more on the neutral side of warming, and it brings balance back. It's supposed to be really good for bloating. I tend to use other herbs for bloating more. I would say that if you had fennel tea, it would be a great support for your stomach function, just like the dandelion leaf. The dandelion root also is really good for digestive function. And it's thought to be a little bit more of that bitter stimulant that you have as a tea before you eat. But, you can drink it any time of day. I've noticed with dandelion root that some people will have an adverse response to it in terms of their digestion, and it might actually make them more bloated. So it's to do with some of the chemicals that you find in dandelion root. I would go for the leaf. I seem to have just always great responses with dandelion leaf. Lemon balm also is one of the herbs that's used in a really famous herbal formula for any sort of gastrointestinal symptoms. It's like the rescue remedy for the GIT. Lemon balm will work really well in conjunction with fennel and chamomile and peppermint. So, by the way, I should have mentioned peppermint. That would be a fantastic herb for your medicinal home garden. Grows really easily too and produces beautiful aroma. So back to lemon balm, you could be using the lemon balm as your daily tonic for your digestive system, but you would be drinking it either with your food or after eating your food, because it helps when the food's in the stomach and helps your body to process that food. There's a particular action that we refer to in herbal medicine called a carminative. So it's carminative with an R, not an L. And it refers to the calming effects on the digestive system. So there you go, dandelion leaf, chamomile, lemon balm, fennel, and peppermint would be a wonderful selection of herbs for your home medicinal garden to help you with your digestion. If, by the way, you're wanting a little quick remedy for headaches, that's another thing that I notice a lot of women will present with, irrespective of which life stage they're in, whether it is puberty, perimenopause, fertile years, pregnancy, etc. A very nice mix that you can make is equal amounts of lemon balm, chamomile, and skullcap. So the three herbs there that I mentioned before for the nervous system. And you just use maybe like a teaspoon of each, and you drink that a few times a day. And that should be very helpful with your headaches. The last thing that I want to mention here, because I think now we've covered so many herbs, and hopefully I've given you lots of ideas for your herbal friends in your garden. Last thing I wanted to talk about was drying them. So a lot of us will just assume that we can put them in paper bags and leave them in the pantry to dry. And, you certainly can do this, but what you'll notice is that the leaves will usually brown and the flowers might also brown. So it's definitely worth looking at getting yourself a dehydrating machine. And there are lots of different types on the market. So I'd probably recommend starting with a simple one first. For example, I got my one off Amazon over a decade ago, and it cost me $35 at the time. It's 35 Australian dollars. Still works perfectly. It's not as cool looking as the Excaliburs and the more expensive ones, but I don't use it all the time. So maybe just weigh up the pros and cons of spending big or small on a dehydrator. And why you need it is because of that high water content in the herbs. So if you're putting the herbs in paper bags in the pantry, or if you're hanging them up in the air to dry, which also isn't so great, because they usually don't get great even circulation through the bunch of herbs. With all of that water moisture content that they contain, that's what's making them brown. And if you put them into a dehydrator, it will efficiently remove that moisture much more quickly without harming the plants. You could probably use a setting like maybe 30 degrees Celsius and leave the dehydrator on for 6 hours or so, or maybe even overnight when, electricity might be a bit cheaper. It's a good thing. And it will end up giving you a leaf that is really crisp and green and snaps between your fingers when you bend it, which is the perfect sign of a dry herb. You know, most herbs, they contain 80 to 90% moisture, so that's a lot of moisture that you're needing to remove. I have been out of the game a bit with dehydrators. I haven't seen them for a while, so I've just had a quick look for you to see what's around. It looks like you can get a BioChef dehydrator for just over $100 at Vitality for Life online. I've bought from them before, actually. I bought a really fantastic masticating juicer from them, which produces really delicious and very life-filled juices. So I can recommend buying from them. And then there are others that you can get ranging between a couple hundred to $400 or $500. I think the Excalibur is over $600. The one that I bought, actually, I found that again is still for sale on Amazon for $45.99. There you go. And there is even a Kmart version for $55. So you've got lots of options with your dehydrators. I would recommend using them also when you're making other herbal preparations. So maybe you're making fruit straps or herbal pills or pastils, and you want the pastils to sort of like dry out a little bit so they go a bit more gummy. And you may not be using them all the time. So just think about, how much you're happy to spend and how much space you want to take up in your kitchen for something that you might use in the winter most often or the spring most often. Well, I hope that this episode's been interesting for you and given you those herbalist insights into how to create your own beautiful home medicinal garden, covering all of your needs as women from puberty through to menopause and postmenopause. Have a beautiful day, and thanks for listening, everybody. See you in another episode of Well Woman.
Hey everybody, please note that the information, opinion and advice provided in this podcast are not intended to replace professional medical care. They are for general information and educational purposes only. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast may not always be those of the host. Thanks for listening.